Good afternoon. And welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. The confusion of strength and weakness. It's interesting that the times when you feel like you're exerting the most strength is when you are bringing the full force of your will into play in order to accomplish something. And one of the things that you've all been learning as we've been going through the course, and something that all of you learn who actually embark upon a spiritual quest, if I can put it that way, and you really pay attention to essential factors of yourself at the deepest levels of your honesty, you find that the great exertion of will that you try to express is actually when you're weakest. Because it's when you're coming from a completely independent, autonomous place where you experience no connection with divinity, no connection with everything, no connection with God. And ultimately, what sets many people on, quote, the path, unquote, is the disarming and disillusioning discovery that all of the exertion of will that you've brought to bear in your life has not led you to peace and security that has stability to it. And you say, there must be something more. I'm missing something here. When you arrive at this point of, for lack of better words, failure, as an ego successfully exerting will, and you accept it, you don't fight it anymore. You fully acknowledge that the attempt has been a total failure. You give up, and we've talked about this before. If you genuinely acknowledge the fact that it's been a failure, you give up. But you can't give up for very long without saying help in one way or another, and reach outside of your best judgments, your best theories, and your best sense of what your will is. And that's when connection can occur. And that's when breakthrough does occur. And then you find yourself companioned with by me or the Holy Spirit or the Father or your own guide. And you find that in accepting the help that you receive, things begin to turn around. Your life literally takes a new direction. You're still in the same world, you're still with other people, but you're not doing it as a tiny, independent, autonomous entity. And as you find things beginning to stabilize and improve, you find, for lack of better words, that there is strength in numbers. Not just the number one, meaning your best sense of yourself, but in companioning with one who is awake, one who loves you, one who knows what is of value and what is not, and whose purpose it is to help you discover what is of value and what is not, so that you can set aside what is not of value voluntarily, so that you find strength to be what manifests in your life when you've abandoned willfulness. An independent will that you call yours. And so, strength and weakness reverse themselves. And what you thought constituted weakness, you now find is your strength. And what you thought was your strength, you now find is your weakness. And so you don't energize what was weakness. You honestly look at your experience and see what happened when you were exercising personal will, personal strength. And you see, in effect, that you were accomplishing nothing, even though for a while it appeared that you were. It's this kind of clarity that allows you to set aside what was a false estimate of strength, because you can see that it is valueless. Mind you, one does not have to be at the end of his rope in order to do this. But it's very often that is when it occurs. You all can begin to express curiosity to know what is of value and what isn't from the Father's point of view before you get to the bottom of the barrel. So let's go into the book. You no more recognize what is painful than you know what is joyful, and are in fact very apt to confuse the two. The Holy Spirit's main function is to teach you to tell them apart. However strange it may seem that this is necessary, it obviously is. The reason is equally obvious. What is joyful to you is painful to the ego. In other words, what is joyful to the divine one that you are is painful to the ego. And as long as you are in doubt about what you are, you will be confused about joy and pain. This confusion is the cause of the whole idea of sacrifice. Wow, think about that. Why would anyone think that sacrifice would be valuable? Well, because, for example, you've been taught that the pleasure of the senses is purely physical and of a base animalistic nature. Now, where on earth did that idea come from? Well, it came from the idea of evolution. After all, you're at the top of the food chain. You're the most advanced of all of the creatures on the planet that evolved from what? A big bang. And an evolution of physical and chemical processes. So, you're just a higher form of a really base life process, life existence. And so at the bottom line, your sole reason for being alive is that you have been a successful survivor. An animal that has succeeded in surviving long enough to lift itself up by its own bootstraps and develop a conscience, etc. So now that you've developed a conscience, and you've been able to imagine and establish values, you've been able to think in terms of least value and greatest value. And greatest value has taken the form of an idea of God and an idea of existence beyond or further in advance of this highly developed stage of animal evolution that you've arrived at. And now comes the coup de grace. Now the idea is that if you deny what you are, you will get rewards in heaven. If you deny the physical impulses, you will be rewarded in heaven. If you, especially for very serious religious reasons, take a vow of poverty, this will advance you greatly. If you will take a vow of lack of some sort, a vow of silence, if you will not go for the gusto, if you will not go for the success in the world's eyes, you will get rewards in heaven. Now you have used your mind to arrive at a point where sacrifice is a holy thing to engage in. Self-denial is a holy thing to engage in. The belittling of your present nature is a healthy thing to do because you're not preoccupied with worldly things. But you see, it isn't your body, it isn't your base self, it's not the world that needs to be denied. It's the interpretation of the world and the interpretation of yourself that has to be invalidated. Now, in broad sweeping terms, you could invalidate it by saying the world doesn't exist. But that's not the answer. The answer is the way I'm seeing the world, the way I'm interpreting my body, the definitions I have created about myself are not real. But I am real, and the world is real. There is something going on that is being misinterpreted by me, being misunderstood by me. And so then, the way to get past the way you're interpreting it, the way you're defining it, is to have someone like me tell you, the only thing confronting you is the kingdom of heaven. The only thing you're experiencing right now is the only thing going on. Reality with a capital R. God being all. The kingdom of heaven. And why do I keep saying that? So that you might be further inspired to look at everything, to look at yourself, to look at your body and your neighbor and your friend with eyes of innocent of false judgments, innocent of false interpretations, innocent of definitions you have applied to everything. And you look at it with curiosity. Continuing, obey the Holy Spirit and you will be giving up the ego. There is that hard word again. Obey. Oh, obedience. There's where you let go of autonomy. There's where you let go of independence. These are good things, you say. If I give up my autonomy, if I become obedient to somebody else, that's like going back to being a child. And I have become emancipated. I'm 21 or older. And I am now in the place in life where it's my right to assert myself on my own and enjoy the freedom in doing so. Well, are you having a good time? So you're confused. Obey the Holy Spirit. You know what? The idea of obedience means fitting into something. You want to be the one piece of the puzzle that's missing from the puzzle. The one that jumped out of the box and said, nobody's going to find me, and put me in that tiny little spot. Well, like you, who has a puzzle with one piece missing and is frustrated, you might say that the whole brotherhood is looking for you because you're missing from your spot, and the joy that would be experienced when you were there, if you were there, is not present yet because you're underneath the corner of the sofa. And they look forward to the joy. We all look forward to the joy of your letting yourself fit in. And you're missing out on the joy of being part of the whole. And you're missing out on the joy of finding that once you let yourself be part of the whole and fit in, all of what constitutes the wholeness of creation becomes your conscious experience of being, and you cease to be a tiny part of it, fitting in with it. But this experience of wholeness, this experience of being inseparable from the mind of God as God, including you, moves in the act of creation. This is your strength. This is your bliss. This is your fulfillment of purpose. But because you're confused, you think that it will be a real and unjustified sacrifice to give up this imagined little bit of autonomy that you think you have achieved. Because as long as you think you have achieved it and are committed to it, you will never feel your wholeness. And you will never feel your strength. And by that I mean your invulnerability. I mean, really. How invulnerable are you underneath the corner of the couch, where the cat might get you, or the dog might chew you up? You see what I mean? Yes, you see what I mean. Obey the Holy Spirit, and you will be giving up the ego. Now that's a doom and gloom statement for the ego, but it's a very clear statement about how to release yourself from the ego. You say, oh, I want to give up my ego. All of you would say, sure, I want to give up my ego. Okay. Obey the Holy Spirit, and you will be giving up the ego. Oh, well, that's a different matter. Obey the Holy Spirit. Can't I just give up my ego and still have fun being independent? That's called confusion. It really is called confusion. No, you can't. Obey the Holy Spirit. That means link up. That means join with. That means desire to know of the Holy Spirit. It means listening for the Holy Spirit. And since we have found out that the Holy Spirit is nothing more than your right mind, you don't have to be quite so afraid of joining with the Holy Spirit, because intellectually you can grasp the fact that doing so will be an act of integration of you to you. Obey the Holy Spirit, and you will be giving up the ego. but you will be sacrificing nothing. On the contrary, you will be gaining everything. If you believed this, there would be no conflict. Is there conflict? Then you don't believe it. Yet. Explore believing it. Trek into new territory. Stop paying lip service only to the idea that you want to wake up or that you want to give up your ego. If you believed this, there would be no conflict. That is why you need to demonstrate the obvious to yourselves. It is not obvious to you. You believe that doing the opposite of God's will can be better for you. You also believe that it is possible to do the opposite of God's will. Therefore, you believe that an impossible choice is open to you and one which is both very fearful and very desirable. Listen, yet God wills. He does not wish. Your will is as powerful as His. Why? Because it is His. You are the son, daughter of God. Your inheritance is from your father, mother. His will is yours. The only thing is, in the act of extending it to you, God didn't break off a little bit of His will and deposit it in you. You are the extension of God. You are the presence of God embodied. You are God infinitely individualized. All of the brotherhood is God infinitely individualized, without ever being fragmented or broken up into parts. The ego's wishes, continuing, the ego's wishes do not mean anything because the ego wishes for the impossible. You can wish for the impossible, but you can will only with God. This is the ego's weakness and your strength. God, you mean I have to listen to God all the time? You mean I have to be connected with God all the time? What, you want me to become a nun? You want me to live in a monastery and be connected with God all the time? And be abnormal? No. I want you to cook dinner with God. I want you to sleep with God. I want you to make love with God. I want you to vacuum with God. I want you to deal with your brother with God. I want you to look at your brother with God. I want you to do all the things you're doing from the place of excellence in each of you, instead of from a place of confusion and ignorance that causes you to be miserable when it's your birthright to be experiencing joy. I want you to start looking at the trees with God, or your fingernails with God. I want you to look with God so that you might see God in everything you observe.